Shalom, Israel. I want to thank my new subscribers, and I want to read out of the book of Ezekiel to, to give you the type of videos that I put out. I wanted to read to you out of Ezekiel what I do. It says, chapter 33 and 1, it says, Again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, When I bring the sword means war, upon the land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast and set him in their watchmen, set him for their watchmen. If when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet and warn the people. Then whosoever heareth the sword, the sound of the trumpet, and taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. But he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come and take away any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So in other words, like this pandemic going on, what I do is I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of research, and I put things together. And me and my boys, sometimes we get together, we call it the three Hebrew boys, and we just put the word out there. We put the warning out there. Even with the vaccines, I try to say what I can to warn the people. When I say people, I'm talking to us Israelites that's waking up, that's realizing that this Bible is actually a history book to us, and that the Caucasian race have lied to us for hundreds of years about who we are. So to those that has waken up, I give warning to them. To those that are still Christians, you black folks that still call yourselves African American, that just don't quite get it, then you may not understand. But I give warning to those that are awake. When my group come together, we give warning to those that are awake about what's going on, what's happening right now today, and what you should do according to scriptures. Now, what I mean by that is those that are awakened, if you are still calling yourselves African American, I've said this many times, you're not African American. There's no such thing as African American. You're actually calling yourself a slave of these two Edomites. Okay? You're calling yourself a slave. One was the founder of America. Another one was a Roman general that took over Africa, a part of Africa, and made the black slaves. So you got a Roman general, Leo Scipio Africanus, an Italian explorer, Mario Vespucci. And in Psalms 49 and 11, it says, Their inward thoughts is that their houses shall continue forever, the dwelling place where they live, and their dwelling places to all generations. They call their lands after their own names. So all of these races are naming themselves after land. So there's no such thing as somebody calling themselves French or Italian or anything like that. They naming themselves after land. The Most High called us by nations, and we are the nation of Israel from the tribe of Judah out of America. Okay, then you have the other 12 tribes, the 12 of us, the other 11 tribes are all spread it about. Just like the Bible said, he will spread us out because of the sins of our forefathers. Now, what I want to get into, because this is Christmas week coming up. And Christmas is normally the celebration of the birth of what you Christians call Jesus Christ. You say he was born on the 25th of December. You give out a bunch of gifts on a fake day, a made-up character, and you forced the slaves to worship that day. Those slaves today are African American, who so-called African American, those that are still in the world. They are celebrating such a pagan day, and what I am going to do today or this morning, because the Sabbath is over, is going into a Sunday morning, and I am going to show this fake so-called Jesus Christ, this birth date, and this whole thing about Christmas. And you're going to see who you really worshiping. You're going to see who you really worshiping. You call him a Jesus Christ, which is a made-up name and a made-up character. This is pretty much who you call your Jesus. This is the one that they made up. Okay? You see the guy on your left, right? Same guy, right? This is a book called Trip Type to Poison. I'm going to read out of that book later. And I'll probably go pretty fast, but it's a lot that need to be read so you can understand this guy that they chose. Really, the sixth Pope of Rome, second son, put him up to be the face of the Messiah. You also call him Christ. The 12 disciples never used this word Christ, and I'll show you that as well. Well, as a matter of fact, this word Christ or Christian was not used. That came from a guy by the name of Cyrus. He lived 2 decades before the Messiah was even born. And he had a following. And they are the ones that called him Christ during the time of Greece, when Greece was dominating at that time. So that's why when the people talked about, I think it's in the book of Acts, I'll go in and read it. The people that talked about, that called him Christ, confused Cyrus with the Messiah, the following. And this is how that Christ word got stuck. And that's why the scriptures say the mystery of iniquity already worked, because it was slipping in then. The Christian, if you look up the word Christian, in French it's called Cretan. In Swiss it's called Christian. And under the Greek Latin word is Krianos, something like that, which is a generic term for anyone but of 10 with the sense of, read that right, a generic term for anyone but often with the sense of poor fella. So when they was calling the followers of the Messiah Christians, they were basically saying, you poor fella. This is how this word came about. It was started under Cyrus, but then over time, as it grew, and the Roman Catholic Church took it and started forcing people to become Catholic, with all the war and killing, Christian became a normal name. But I try not to use the word at all, because I'm still trying to get out of it. And I use the word the Messiah or the Mashiach is what they called him at the time. If they was alive, they still wouldn't use this word Christian. It would be the Messiah. So if you see me and the 3 Hebrew boys together, a lot of times we use the word Messiah. We don't use the word Christian. We might read it because it's all in the scriptures after the Catholic Church, the Jesuits added a lot of words to the Bible. Of course, naturally you would think that That's what they called them, but they didn't. There's a lot of things that they didn't do in those days that today they lie, and we've become so accustomed to the lie. We just think nothing of it. But I want to go into this guy here. His name is actually Cedral Borgia. Cedral Borgia, the second son of Alexander the Sixth. This is the Apocrypha, and I'm gonna go and read where his father put him up to be the face of the Most High. This is the Wisdom of Solomon, 14 and 8. But that which is made with hands is cursed, as well it as he that made it. He because he made it, and it because being corruptible, it was called God. This was during the time of Rome, Pope Alexander the Sixth. Verse 9. For the ungodly and his ungodliness are both alike hateful unto God. This is how Cedral Borgia lived his life. He was terrible. His father was too. But that dude was ruthless. He was a murderer. He was gay. And he had sex with his sister for 31 years. All that I'm going to read out of that book. And all this happened during the Roman time, late 1500s, early 1600s, something like that. And let's go to 10. For that which is made shall be punished, together with him that made it. Therefore, even upon the idols of the Gentiles shall there be a visitation, because in the creature of God, they are become an abomination and stumbling blocks to the souls of men, and a snare to the feet of the unwise. See, this is they use this mainly for slaves, because slaves were the Israelites, and to keep the Israelites from finding out who their God was. This is what they created, and they threw it and forced us at us, and took our history book, which is the Bible, and taught it to us instead of us teaching it to them. But by that time, we're slaves, so we're understanding scriptures according to Edom, Esau, the Caucasian race, the way they gave it to us, and they gave us this image eventually. See, and that's why a lot of people, when you see white folks, they want you to think that they're descendants of gods, and you just automatically give this worship or respect to not question them, which is how it was in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. A little bit of the 80s, but it's not so bad now. Verse 12. For the devising of idols was the beginning of spiritual fornication, and the invention of them, the corruption of life. For neither were they from the beginning, neither shall they be forever. For by the vainglory of men they entered into the world. Therefore shall they come shortly to an end. For a father afflicted with untimely mourning, that's Pope Alexander the Sixth, when he hath made an image of his child, soon taken away, now honored him as a god, which was then a dead man, and delivered to those that were under him ceremonies and sacrifices. And that's what's coming up this Christmas, ceremonies and sacrifices, because they sacrifice children on the 25th of December. These are Illuminati secret society members. That's a child sacrifice day. Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas is the biggest. This is out of the Apocrypha that predicted Alexander the Sixth and what he would do with his son, Seja-Bojer. This is who y'all calling Jesus. This is not the real Messiah. Of course, the Messiah was not white. And yes, it does matter. Okay, because if it didn't matter, then why would they change it? And furthermore, if you knew that the Messiah is not white and you tried to research it, you would see that the Messiah came from the tribe of Judah. Allow African Americans to understand who they really are, so they keep the Messiah as white and not black. I'm hoping I'm making sense. So that's why you see a lot of black people saying it doesn't matter, because they have no idea that the Messiah was from the tribe of Judah. So in other words, if the Messiah was here, the black Messiah, guess where he would be living at? South Side Chicago, East Side LA, West Side Cleveland, Acres Homes in Houston. All the black areas in the different cities and states where they're ghettos. If the Messiah came back, that's where he would be, because that's the tribe that he came from. That's right. Solomon, David, because that's his bloodline. Christ came through the bloodline of King David. Today they would be called so-called Negroes. But that's a derogatory word, calling yourself African American or Negro. That's a derogatory word. The Bible calls it bywords in the book of Deuteronomy. So let's move on to this faggot. This is Judah Trembles Under Rome. Now this was an expensive book. I don't know how much it is now, but I'm gonna read a part out of here. Now remember, this guy name is Seja-Bojer. So when I start reading in these books, understand that that's the same character that you keep calling Jesus. This is page 134. The Gentile followers of Paul in Antioch. Remember, Antioch was a city in Greece. Matter of fact, there was something out of Acts I wanted to read. Because I know there was the church in Antioch was actually the church in Greece. And they used that word Christ and Christians. The Gentile followers of Paul in Antioch, Syria, were called Christians. Well, see, there you go. But the apostles and disciples which followed Jesus never called themselves Christians. Let you see it for yourself. Hopefully you can read it. Right there where I got the red dot. And when you read down to the last part, it says here, never call themselves Christians. It was only in Greece. It was only in Greece, if you can read that right there. Because Antioch was in Greece, and they was used to that word under Cyrenius. This is why they used the word Christians. I'll read it again. The Gentile followers of Paul in Antioch, Syria, were called Christians. Acts 11:26. But the apostles and disciples which followed, I call him Yeshua, y'all call him Jesus, never called themselves Christians. So when you use this word Christ, who are you talking to? It's really important to dig up this history so you know what you're doing, who you're praying to. You know, because for years they've lied to us about this. This Bible is a history book that our people wrote for us, by us, for us, to prepare us for the end. Now we're at the end. And we have to look at this Bible as in Hebrew Israelite. You get a whole lot better understanding. And then you want to call on your God, our God. Our God name is Ahiah. And our Savior is Yeshaya. Yeshua means Savior in Hebrew. You got to learn some of this Hebrew. Learn something of this Hebrew, so you know who you calling on. When you talking about Jesus, that's actually a Greek god, Zeus. Pronounce Jesus in Latin, Jesus. Hail Zeus. This is where all this stuff come from. And a lot of us Israelites that have waken up, we are finding out all of these things. And it's why you see so many Israelite camps and a lot of different videos warning people that, hey, we've been lied to. We are not who they say we are. You know, we're not Negroes. We're actually the children of this book, this Bible. We are the descendants of this Bible, and all the characters that was in the Bible that they changed during the Dark Ages and made everything lily white. I want to go more into Cedric Bourgier. So that's out of this book. Now I'm gonna get into Triptych the Poison. Now you're gonna see this character that they use, how they picked a notorious killer, and this dude was ruthless. I'm just gonna jump from page to page. It is not important to state the exact age when Cedric became his sister's lover, made the wife of one of his brothers his mistress, or murdered another brother. It is only relevant to say that he committed these acts, for it was such that made for him one of the most cruel, lascivious, and unnatural men who ever lived. This was an evil dude. Rodrigo Borgia was his father, Pope Alexander VI. That was his father's name. His name is Cedric Borgia. But this dude here was something else, a murderer, made his brother's wife his mistress, and he murdered several people. When he looked at other people, it is as though he turned the telescope round to do so. He saw the people about him as midgets, less no more than gnats or moths, to be crushed to death or exterminated with insecticide. In other words, he looked down at everybody. Everybody was beneath him. That's the way his attitude was. Rodrigo Borgia, at the time, he was the illegitimate son of Rodrigo Borgia. That's right. Rodrigo Borgia had sex with his sister. That was how Rodrigo Borgia Cedric Borgia was born, through actually his father's sister. And after the child was born, I think eventually she left Rome, never to be seen again. Rodrigo Borgia, at the time of Cedric's birth, a cardinal, and later to become Pope Alexander VI. Okay, let me go on down. I don't want to get, if I read too much out of what I'm trying to get at, it'll confuse you. Okay. Cedric's sister, her name was Lucretia, was born on the 18th April 1480. He had another brother, so it was two boys and one girl. The two boys appear to have been somewhat abnormally interested in their pretty little sister. Lucretia had the appearance of one who begged to be dominated. As a matter of fact, both brothers did deal with her, and Rodrigo, the father, dealt with her too. That's why she couldn't keep her husband. I think she had, I want to say, 3 or 4. One left her because of that, and one Rodrigo killed and left his body in the Tigris River. So in those early days of their precious childhood in that unhealthy forcing house of passionate emotion, the two boys courted their sister. You hear that? The two boys courted their sisters, begging her favorites kisses, her embracing her, loving her, that's having sex with her. Lucretia would have been superhuman if she could have refrained from taking advantage of this state of affairs. She did not wish to. She let them sue for her favors, always hoping that she would be able to accept Caesar as the winner. Now remember, that's the one y'all call Jesus all the time. She evidently saw in Caesar the embodiment of all masculinity, all charm. Juan, which is the other brother, too, she loved. Certainly she loved him. He was handsome and a Borgia. But Caesar dominated the nursery and the house. He was the favorite of Van Nodza. He was the beloved of Lucretia, and he was determined to oust Juan from the place he held in the cardinal's affections and occupy himself. Juan is his brother. This Vanoza was one of Rodrigo's, I don't want to say wife, but lovers, because his father had many lovers too, and this was an old man. They came to understand why their uncle visited their mother, and they began to realize that their uncle was indeed their father. That's Rodrigo. Old in knowledge, they would gravely accept this state of affairs whilst they played their games of love and passion within the family circle. Let me move ahead. When he returned to Rome, he lived in the Borgo. He lived in the Borgo, close to his sister's home. He visited her frequently, and Lucretia felt the power of that spell which he had always cast over her. This is Caesar Borgia. He would go out on ventures and come back. It is said that Caesar loved two people. Only his mother, Venosa, and his sister, Lucretia. Now Rodrigo, his father, didn't marry these women, even though Venosa is Caesar's mother, and his sister, Lucretia. It may have been that Caesar loved these two because they gave him the unquestioning devotion of submission, which he sought from the rest of the world. See, he wanted everybody to bow down to him. Everybody in Rome and eventually he went to France and they got them people to do that as well, which is what you do today. You bow down to Caesar Borgia. They just call him Jesus now, but you bowing down to him. See how tricky these people are? This was scandalous enough, but there was another rumor in the streets of Rome. Caesar was often seen in the company of his sister. He was observed visiting her. They openly behaved like lovers, and there were spies to report that they spent nights together. It was said that Caesar Borgia was determined that his sister should be his mistress before she was the bride of any other. It's called incest. Caesar, without doubt, was the most important person in Lucretia's life at this time, as he probably was until his death. Caesar set the pace, and Lucretia followed. On a hot On a hot June day, Lucretia, wearing a gold embroidered dress which cost 15,000 ducats, her golden hair caught in a jeweled net, was married to Giovanni Sforza. Juan had come home from Spain, that's Cedra's brother, and it was he who led his sister to the Pope's apartments, where the ceremony was to take place. Cedra was present, his resentment suppressed. In his in his episcopal garment, he would have made a striking contrast to Juan, dazzling with his jewels. He would have resented not only his brother, but the bridegroom who was to marry his sister. Lucretia looked essentially virginal. Her somewhat blank expression was that of a wide-eyed child, and it was small wonder that when it was declared she was too young for the consummation for the marriage, this was agreed to be so. In other words, she got married, but they couldn't have sex. It was declared she was too young for the consummation. So that after she got married, it was never consummated. But yet she was having sex with both of her brothers. Juan looked very handsome in his jeweled garments, and Lucretia, ever ready to be enamored of the members of her own family, may have wondered whether she was now going to play once more that game of creating jealousy and passion which she had enjoyed with her brothers when she was a small girl. At the supper party which followed the Pope's apartment, Cedra was not present, and as he was the only member of the family to absent himself, it is very likely that he did so in his jealousy rage at seeing his sisters married to another man. So he's jealous because his sister got married. So he didn't show up at the I guess party. People without power behind them could disappear suddenly, and no questions would be asked. Cedra had his hand of assassins. Cedra, remember, that's the one you call Jesus. Cedra had his hand of assassins, and any who defied him must either escape from his venom, or it might be that one day they would be set up by the ruffians in the street, stabbed and left to die. Some might be tied in sacks and thrown into the Tiber River. You see all this stuff this man was doing, almost like a mob boss. Matter of fact, it was like a mob boss because the Godfather, the movie Godfather, not all the series, but the first one, was based off of Cedric Beausier's life. This is how they made the movie The Godfather. There was another method of disposing of enemies, and this was by poison. Cedric found this a more satisfying method than any other. It could be easily administered at his table. He himself could watch its being done. He could lift his goblet, drink with the man, and know that before the night was over, that man would be dead. The sense of power such action brought to him was intoxicating. Many secret poisons were known to him, for they had been brought to Spain by the Moors. The Moors were Israelites, black Israelites. These secrets had been preserved for centuries and were known only to his family. Cedric craved power over his fellow men and women, power over life and death. Now understand, Sergio Borgia had two lovers, Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. So all those paintings that you see of Sergio Borgia, that's looks something like this, and all the other paintings that you see of Jesus in old ancient days, that was Leonardo da Vinci. That was Sergio Borgia's gay lover. That's why he always painted Christ on the cross looking with a gay pose, with a woman-like pose. Juan was handsome. Juan was handsome, the handsome of his sons, and both of them, Juan and Cedra, were continually bringing charming people whom they had discovered to minister to their father's pleasure. In other words, they were bringing women and men to their father so he could have sex with them, the father, Pope Alexander VI. They shared these visitors. See, they shared these visitors if they were girls. The Pope, unlike his sons, had never been attracted by beautiful young men. See, that's showing you that Sergio Borgia was gay. Your Jesus that you keep calling was gay. The Pope, unlike his sons, had never been attracted by beautiful young men, but the two brothers were. He craved self-aggrandizement. He wanted all the world to see him as he saw himself, not as a man of the church, but as a great conqueror, the most powerful man in Rome. That's Sergio Borgia. Let me move on. Let's see. Many historians referring to these bulls bring forward the information therein as proof that Cedra was the elder of two brothers. Alexander implies in these bulls that after the death of Demetrio Arrigano, another son was born to Venosa, and this son was Juan. Therefore, it would seem that Cedra was the elder, since he was supposed to have been born during the lifetime of the Arrigano. Let's move on. Cedra was moving towards the climax of jealousy and frustration. Now that Juan was away, his jealousy of his sister's husband was growing to a madness. Giovanni Sforza was becoming very uneasy. Ascanio Sforza, his kinsman, had opposed the election of the new cardinals, and thus had brought down the wrath of the Pope on his head. This had resulted in a great loss of power for Sforza, and Giovanni, as his relations suffered accordingly. He knew the Pope. He knew that the Pope looked with disfavor on his family, and he knew also that Cedra hated him. He must continually watch what he ate and drank. Now this man is scared to death that Cedra was about to kill him. None knew the components of that subtle drought, which the Borgias were apt to slip into the wine of those they considered to be their enemies. All were sure that it could provide death in some form or another. Some men, after partaking of it, appeared to go into a drunken sleep, from which they did not awake. Others went merely away to be seized by violent agony during the night and died before the dawn broke. Some contracted a lingering illness, which did not affect them until weeks later. They went into decline. Their hair fell out, their nails dropped off, and their teeth broke, as though they had suddenly became as brittle as glass. and all were sure that these deaths were brought about by the mysterious concoctions of the Borgias. That's the Borgia family. If one were threatened, though Giovanni, there was only one thing a wise man could do: slip away out of their reach. This was what he did. One night he went out as though he visited a friend, and he did not return. This is Lucretia's husband. Lucretia was indifferent to the loss of her husband. She had tolerated him in her palace, but she had cared nothing for him. Her brothers had made sure of that. She only tolerated the husband, but the brothers made sure she wouldn't fall in love with him. Phaedra was delighted to be within his sisters, as she was to see him. The year she had spent in Passaro would then have seemed a wasted year, although it was characteristic of Lucretia that she should not be aware of this at the time. Lucretia at this phase of her life seemed colorless, wishing only to be dominated. Phaedra and her father were very willing to do the dominating. You see her father having sex with her too. Colorless means without color or dull looking. Phaedra and her father were very willing to do dominating things to her. See, this is a sick family, but this is who you worship. During the trouble of the French, disturbing stories had reached Alexander of his daughter-in-law Sanchia. Phaedra was eagerly awaited the arrival of Sanchia. Lucretia was a little apprehensive. If Sanchia was as beautiful and as irresistible as she was made out to be, Lucretia feared that Phaedra might be interested in the newcomer. So here's Lucretia getting jealous over Phaedra Borgia. Sanchia was dark-haired and dark-skinned, but her eyes were startling blue, and her lashes and brows were as black as her hair. Her mouth was full of sensuous, and in contrast with Lucretia's look of girlish innocence, Sanchia had a look of witchery and deep knowledge. Sanchia had heard of Phaedra's reputation and was fascinated by the most dangerous man in Rome. She realized the need to accept him as a lover, for to have repulsed Phaedra might have meant to endanger her life. She was too careless and impulsive to watch what she ate and drank. Therefore, she told herself that submission to Caesar would be not only a pleasure but a necessity. This prince of vice must certainly have whetted her appetite. It would be amusing to discover who was the more acknowledgeable in pleasures of the sense. So you see how they got the world to pretty much follow under Caesar Borgia by just changing his name to Jesus. Just like how these females felt they should be submissive to him, they got the world being the same way by changing his name, calling him the Son of God. Juan was very handsome, and Sanchia could never resist any man who attracted her. So it was not long before it was said in Rome, Cynthia of Aragon warmed the beds of the Pope's 3 sons. This girl came to town and had sex with all 3 of them. I think that's called an orgy. It was now realized in the Vatican that the more scandalous method of releasing Lucretia must be employed. Divorce. It was therefore announced that the marriage between Lucretia and Sforza had never been consummated, and that Lucretia was still Virgo intacto. This is the Pope considered a good reason for divorce. In other words, Lucretia was still considered a virgin, even though she was already married, but she never had sex with the man, not including the sex she had with her brothers and father. So they still considered her still a virgin. Venosa had decided to give a super party. It was June and hot. Therefore, she did not give the party in her Rome residence, but in her vineyard, which was between the churches of San Martino, Aiamati, and Santa Lucia and Celtic. This is Latin words I can't pronounce. There were other guests besides Venosa, 2 sons, but it was an intimate party. How proud Venosa must have been. Juan, a great soldier and a Spanish duke. Cesar, a great cardinal and destined to be the Holy Father himself. It was true that there were rumors in the city regarding these sons of hers. Cesar inspired fear wherever he went, but she doubting believed that was a sign of his greatness. There would be many to envy her. Cesar, there was one more handsome perhaps than Cesar, but in her fond eyes, more conveniently so, he was great. Her Juan, but Cesar was the greatest man in Italy, and she would be ready to swear in the whole world. It was said that no beautiful young women or young men were safe once Juan had cast his eyes upon them, and that when Juan said, "Come hither," to Juan they must go or suffer the consequences of insulting the Borgia dignity. To Venosa, this seemed exactly as it should be. The 2 most powerful men under his holiness were 2 sons. When they took leave of their mother and stepfather and a few guests who had made up the company, a masked figure appeared in the vineyard and asked softly for the Duke of Gandia. Juan greeted his masked person with pleasure. All present believed it was his newest lover, the sex of whom was as yet unknown, for Juan had been seen in the streets of Rome in the last weeks, accompanied by a masked person to whom he seemed devoted. So here's somebody undercover that's coming for Juan. There's another guy and didn't want to be seen or wanted to be recognized. So he would come to the party with a mask on. But there's no telling. Juan probably told him to wear the mask so he'd know who he was. It seemed clear to everyone that Juan had an engagement with his masked friend. This was evidently so, for when he reached the Piazza degli Ebri, he instructed the groom to wait there for him around for him, and if he did not return in an hour to go home. This was the last time Juan was seen alive. He was soon missed the next day, and when Alexander heard the news, he was filled with alarm. Such parties were seen out. Such party was seen out, and before very many hours had passed, Juan's groom was found in the deserted Piazza degli Ebrei, stabbed to death. And a Dalmatian boatman who lived in his boat, which was moored on the banks of the Tiber, then came forward and said that he had seen a man approach the river, leading to a white horse over which was slung something which might have been a body. A man on horseback had given instruction as to what was to be done, and the boatman had heard him addressed as my lord. The body had been thrown into the river, and the dead man's cloak floated, burying him with for a while. Then he who had been dressed as a my lord ordered the stones be thrown in the cloak at the cloak. This was done, and soon the cloak and body were seen no more. When asked why he did not immediately report what he had seen, the boatman strung his shoulders like that and declared that there was nothing very unusual in seeing a body cast in the river. This is Serge Bourgier killing his own brother at the Tigris River. So the masked man obviously was leading Juan out of there to be murdered. All this was done by the one you call Jesus. The river was dragged and Juan's body recovered. There were ducats in his purse, and no attempt had been made to wrench the jewels from his collar. So he wasn't robbed. I'm going to see what else I can give you about this guy, because I know a lot of you keep calling on this Jesus and you have no idea what's coming out of your mouth when you say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. An awkward complication arose in this juncture. When Lucretia was ready to come to the Vatican, it was discovered that she was 6 months pregnant. It was going to prove rather a difficult ordeal for this girl with the innocent face to stand before these men of the church and swear to her virginity when she was in such a condition. Of course, her dressmakers would do what was possible, and Lucretia would be dressed in billowing skirts. But even so, at 6 months after conception, a pregnant woman was going to find it difficult to hide herself. The Pope was alarmed. See, she done got herself pregnant, but she was pregnant by Cedric Bourgier. Remember, she couldn't have sex with her husband. So how is she coming up pregnant when the only man that she's screwing is Cedric Bourgier, the brother, and the father? Let me move on. There was something else. The affair could be even more sinister. 6 months previously, Cedric had visited his sister in her convent, and it was well known that they were on passionate, loving terms. What a scandal if Lucretia declared Virgo Ataco, which is being a virgin, was not only pregnant, but pregnant with her own brother's child. The Pope and Cedric professed to be deeply shocked when they discovered Lucretia's condition, but they would make this pretense even if they had known of it from its early stages. They had acknowledged the fact that she was pregnant among those who were aware of this. But they certainly could not let it be known or suspected that Sisera might be the father. Therefore, naturally, they would seek for a victim. And there was Pedro Caldas ready at hand. This was a young kid, 16-year-old kid, that they blamed the pregnancy on. She had had a miscarriage. And they put all the blame on the 16-year-old boy. They would have decided they must make him the scapegoat, whether he was guilty or whether he wanted him to take the blame in order to divert suspicion of Sisera. So one day, when Sisera met Pedro near the Pope's apartment, he drew his sword and prepared to attack. Pedro, terrified, took to his heels, and Sisera chased him right into the steps of the potentially throne where the young Spaniard begged the Pope to save him. Alexander was prepared to do this, but Sisera thrust at him with his sword, and we are told by the Vatican ambassador who was present, the blood spurted up into the Pope's face. It is not known whether or not Pedro escaped at that time, but shortly afterwards, his body was discovered, bound hand and foot, in the river Tiber, and all knew that he had been dispatched for having made Madonna Lucretia pregnant. See, so he killed the guy anyway. Let me keep going because I don't want to get too boring. Lucretia, meanwhile, was enjoying a happy married life. I think she got remarried, with Alfonso. And Alfonso's great delight was pregnant, and he eagerly awaited the birth of the child. Unfortunately, 2 months after its inception, Lucretia had some of her girl attendants were visiting a neighboring vineyard, and in the sudden rush of high spirits, Lucretia suggested a race. Lucretia slipped, caught in the flounces of her gown, and she stumbled to the ground while one of the girls who was immediately behind her fell on her. She fainted and had to be carried back to the palace. That day she had a miscarriage, so the child died. But anyway, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to show you who this Jesus fella is that we've been lied to for many years. We've been lied to for many years. And it's time to wake up to understand this Bible, that this Bible is actually our history book. We are the children of Israel. It's 12 tribes. We are from the tribe of Judah. We are Hebrew Israelites. Okay, we're not Christians, black, African American, nigger, negro, coon, spook, and all them other bywords that they call us. The Most High calls us the nation of Israel. We come from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God we serve is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I think this is the death of the Pope, and then I'm going to close it with this. The Pope was in his 70s, and even a man of his bounding vitality could not be expected to live much longer. Sisera was afraid that his father would die before he. Sisera had achieved his ambition and was wise enough to know that if this should happen, his poison could be a dangerous one. This was in 1503. This was the time where the Apocrypha says he had thought to put his son up to be God. At this time, in 1503, was when it happened, when his father was dying in his 70s. Anyway, this is a picture of Cedric Bogier, if you can see it. And this is ugly ass sister, Lucretia. I don't know what the hell they saw in that. But that's the life of Cedric Bogier, the one y'all call Jesus, and y'all will be celebrating. I don't think he wasn't even born on 25th of December, but that's who y'all will be celebrating come Friday, so Thursday. So I'm gonna say shalom to you, and I just wanted to blow this Christmas garbage out of the water. We Israelites do not celebrate Christmas, Easter, and all of that other stuff. We celebrate Passover and the all of the holy days that are in Scripture. And our feast, as far as giving, comes in February. That's the feast. That's the feast time where we give, and where Esther has saved the Israelites from being murdered in the book of Esther. But you have to go into the Apocrypha to find out more about Esther, because the Bible only gives just a little. But she was a remarkable woman, and that was the feast giving where we give gifts. I think it's like the end of February, around that time. But we do not take unto this Christmas garbage, because we know children are sacrificed. So I'll say shalom to you, and I hope you guys had a good Sabbath.